Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. My name is Gwen Sorley, and I will be your host today. This is, I believe, the fifth or sixth webinar we have in our webinar series on executive function. So today we will be talking about emotion regulation. And I think this is a really good time to discuss this because usually around the time of the holidays, we all have heightened emotions. You might notice that you or your children have a lot of emotions you're dealing with right now, whether they're joyous or sad. There are a lot of varying and heightened emotions right now. But in general, if you have attention difficulties or ADHD or weak executive function, emotion regulation can be pretty challenging on a day-to-day basis. So today we're going to be talking about emotion regulation, what that is, and some strategies you can use to improve this area of executive function. Now, not only are we going to be talking about strategies to use, but also why we're using these strategies. What's the foundation of why we use these strategies and why they work? So we'll be talking a little bit about that too, not just giving you suggestions, but telling you why this is a good suggestion for you to try. Now, we are recording this event, so at the end of the webinar, you'll receive an email with the replay link. That way you can share this webinar with any family members or friends or colleagues who were unable to attend the live event. And if at any time you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear your comments. There are going to be times that I'm going to ask you to pipe in and give me some additional information. So make certain that you do use the chat box and let me know what you're thinking. All right, so I'd love to share your thoughts and your ideas with the others in the audience because your ideas and your comments really do enhance everyone's experience. So again, we're going to be talking about emotion regulation. Now, I know that we've all had an experience like this. Maybe you're not a golfer, right? So maybe this didn't occur to you on the golf course, but you've had a similar experience where something small happened and suddenly your emotions exploded. You had a really huge emotional response to something that was actually so small, right? We have had that experience, and that's an example of poor emotion regulation. So do you have these experiences? Does your child seem to have large reactions to situations that are really very small? Or maybe when you think about your relationships, you have lots of conflicts that evolve around those relationships. Or maybe you or your child experience extreme anger or sadness. I'm certain some of us have experienced these, at least one, or if not all of these areas. So emotion regulation, what is it? Emotion regulation skills are the skills that allow you to manage and direct your emotions. They're part of executive function, and these are skills that are often difficult for individuals with attention difficulties. And we really need to understand this management and understanding of our emotions. Why is it important? There are a lot of reasons why this is important. And, I'm going to say many times your child, but know that this is across the board. This applies to everyone from children to adults. So when I perhaps say your child, this applies to all ages, okay? So when we look at emotion control, we see that good emotion regulation actually helps your child develop positive relationships and is also a strong predictor of academic performance and success. My slide's not changing there for some reason. Okay. If your child has good emotion control, or if you have good emotion control, you'll notice that you're better able to focus on what's important. You can focus better at the task at hand rather than focusing on anxiety or other negative emotions. Also, students who can self-regulate, they actually perform better in tasks that involve inhibitory control, delayed gratification, and long-term goals. If you were at our webinar a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the ability to delay gratification and how that's closely related to inhibitory control. If you cannot control your inhibitions, right? If you're very impulsive, then it's typically difficult for you to delay gratification. And delayed gratification, your ability to delay that gratification and not just go for that immediate gratification, is closely linked to success in adulthood. So if you are able to better control your emotions, you're also going to be able to delay gratification, which we know is very important. Remember, we talked about the marshmallow experiment. Hopefully some of you actually looked that up and watched that experiment. Very interesting, all about delayed gratification. So it's important that we focus now and help our children develop good emotion regulation skills, because these skills will last a lifetime. Now, keep in mind, it's never too late. So whether your child is 6, 16, or you're 56 and you need to improve your current skills, it's important. It's worth investing the time in developing emotion regulation, because adults who do not have good emotion regulation, they report less satisfaction in the workplace. They have difficulties with mental health and also difficulties with general well-being. Hannah says, I've had moments where I've had huge emotional outbursts over minor annoyances because I was already upset or stressed out from something else that happened earlier. That's a really good point, Hannah. And that really ties in to what we're going to talk about as far as skills. And if you have weak skills, and stress and anxiety do negatively affect our ability to control and utilize our cognitive skills, then it's going to be very difficult when that situation occurs to really respond appropriately. And I think, Hannah, that everyone here can relate to what you're saying. And in these next few slides, you'll see how we bring that all together. So what's the connection? There are studies that have shown that skills such as inhibitory control and also attention are highly related to increased emotion regulation. There was one study that was done with a group of children who were ages 4 to 6, and they found that there was a significant correlation between those individuals' ability to control their inhibitions and their ability to control their emotions. Also, they did a study with students who were ages 7 to 10, and those students who had higher or better attentional control also had better emotion regulation. Now, again, these were children, but I'm certain you can relate. Those individuals that you know as adults, whether it's yourself or a colleague or a friend, if they have strong focus and strong cognitive skills, typically they have strong emotion regulation. So when we talk about emotion regulation, we're really talking about key foundational skills that are necessary for strong emotion regulation. So let's look at these different areas, because like Hannah said, when something's already occurred and I'm already stressed, it's hard for these cognitive skills to kick in, and then I have a huge response to something. So when you're in that heat of the moment, there are very specific cognitive skills that we need to utilize. These include processing. That's the ability to understand what's going on currently, right? Being able to process the information of what's going on. Also, attention, your ability to stay calm and focused in order to decide what to do or how to respond. So first you have to process the information. You have to remain calm enough to start thinking about the different solutions or responses. Then also planning. While you're thinking about those possible solutions or responses, you have to think about the potential outcomes or the potential consequences of each of those responses. Then you have to have that mental flexibility, right? The ability to take this current situation and apply that strategy that you think is best in that moment. So it might be completely opposite of what you were doing, but now you have to be mentally flexible and enact that strategy that you're thinking about. And all during this time, you have to control your impulses, right? You have to have that ability to not just react, to stop, think, and then act. So, did you ever really break down emotion regulation and think about all of the critical skills that need to be in place in order for good emotion regulation to take place? Probably not. Many of us probably have really never broken it down in that way, but it's pretty amazing when you sit back and you look at all of the skills that are necessary. And again, these are skills that are typically weakest for individuals with attention difficulties or weak executive function. So, what's a strategy that we can use? Because when we are in the heat of the moment, we actually have a decreased ability to use our cognitive skills. I was listening to one presenter, and he actually said that in times of emotion, those emotional times, they make us stupid. And we can all relate to that, right? Because we've all had that moment in our lives where we have this big emotional response. And then afterwards, we sit back and we're able to reflect on what occurred. And we think, that was so stupid. So, in that moment, we truly do have a decreased ability to use our cognitive skills. So, one strategy that we can use is to make a plan, but not only make that plan, but practice the plan. Because if you don't have a plan in place and you haven't practiced that plan, you're expecting that in the heat of the moment, you're going to be able to utilize all of those cognitive skill areas to their maximum. It's going to be much easier if you have thought about a plan in advance and practice that plan. Then it's kind of like second nature, right? It'll kick in and you'll be able to respond more appropriately. So this is an activity that you can do with yourself, or you could do this with your child or your clients, your students. Think about what the plan is going to be. What can you do? Brainstorm all the different options. What can you do when you find yourself getting upset? Now, I jotted down some ideas, but what I would like all of you to do, because I bet you've had this conversation with your child or perhaps with yourself at times, just type in the chat box some of your ideas. What do you have in your toolbox when you start getting upset? What are some of those strategies that you can share with the group today? You could talk to me or a friend or who else. Focus on your breathing. Take 20 slow, deep breaths and talk as you go. Monica has similar. Oh, lots of people. Myron, G, Delia is saying she counts to 10. And here we're incorporating take 20 slow breaths and count as you go. Asked to go outside and walk in the grass. We know when you put your feet in the grass, bare feet especially, that it has that calming effect. Take a break and do jumping jacks or an exercise. Talk yourself through it. Listen to your favorite song. Practice mindfulness. Draw. And if you remember in our previous webinar on focusing, we did a mindful drawing technique. So you might want to go back and look at that webinar or that ebook and revisit that mindful drawing, because that will be a good strategy to use. Write in your journal, pet your dog or your cat, because we all know that that definitely has a calming effect. And then you want to categorize, because not all of these strategies can be used in every environment, right? Some you can only use at home. Some you can use at work and at home. Some you can only use at school or when you're in an e-learning situation. So make certain you categorize those as well. James says music is magic for ADDers. Sky says stamped feet, if I can, saying left, right. Grounding, that is an excellent idea, Sky. I've not heard that one before, but that would be a really good grounding technique. So stamp feet and say left, right, left, right. Monica, I close my eyes and I try to think about something calming. Jack says, text me on the phone and describe the situation in detail before you act. That's a really good suggestion for your child. Very good. Myron says, just laugh. That's a great way to get yourself refocused. Gail says, go for a walk, breathe, say ABCs backwards. I don't know if I could do that. You all have such great ideas. Sky says, hang upside down, activates vagus nerve, relaxation response. Very good. Hannah, take a walk, leave the room to cool down. Very good ideas. I'm going to incorporate many of these. G says, drink some water. Retha says, watch funny videos. Deanna says, my son was taught to say lists in his head like skins for Fortnite character. Very good. You all had such great ideas. So incorporate some of those, some of these that are on the screen right now, but also all of these great suggestions that you have today. So make your plan. What are some of those things that you can do? And then remember to categorize, because like Sky said, if I can, stomp my feet. So it might not always be appropriate in the middle of the workplace or at school to stomp your feet. But if you are in a situation where you can do that, stomp your feet and left, right, that's a good setting to do that. So make certain you make your list and then categorize that list. Then there are some steps, because we said it's not enough to just make a plan, right? You have to practice that plan, because if you practice it, then it will become more automatic, right? It will become second nature for you. So much easier to kick in if you've practiced it in advance. So discuss the plan and the coping strategies. Then come up with a nonverbal prompt. So if you are physically in the room with your child, or maybe this is between you and your spouse, or this might be between you and your students or your clients, try to come up with a nonverbal prompt, because you don't want to, in a situation maybe where there are other people around, say, now remember our plan, right? Because that's just going to heighten emotions. So maybe just a very simple nonverbal prompt. It might just be, touching your nose. I know a lot of you touch your ears like Carol Burnett used to do. It may just be pointing to an object in the room. It may be a facial expression. Whatever it may be, have that nonverbal prompt available. And then practice the plan. You might do a little role playing. So perhaps you have the plan that you and your child or your students have come up with, and then you role play, right? Act out that scenario and you show how to utilize the plan. And then you can reverse roles where they act it out. You could use puppets if you have a really young child, or you could use dolls or stuffed animals if you're working with young children. There's a variety of ways that you can do this. If you're an adult and you're doing this yourself, you could just practice in front of the mirror, or on your drive into work, just practice how you're going to respond sometimes. And then after you have had an emotional response, either yourself or your child or your students, make certain you take time to reflect. What went well? Okay, we put the plan in action. What worked really well for us? And then be flexible enough to also think about what didn't go well, what can we improve, and have that mental flexibility so that you can revise the plan. Maybe you thought it was going to be a good plan, but then when you put it into real action, it didn't work as you thought it would. So revise it. So make certain you discuss the plan, come up with a nonverbal cue, practice the plan, and then always give yourself or your child or your students time to reflect. James says, is it wise and or proper to tell others that you have a problem with your emotions because of your ADHD? I think that is a very personal question. And I think that for many people, and maybe some people here in the audience could share their thoughts on this. Do you share the fact that you have ADHD and that's why you struggle? And I don't think it's a bad idea in many situations, because it will help others develop that empathy, really understand why you're struggling with certain areas. Sometimes you might find that you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable explaining why you're struggling. Nishama, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She says it depends on the people you are sharing with. Some people are judgmental, and that's what I think, James. I think that it can be really beneficial, and if you feel comfortable in that situation, then it might be a good idea. Hannah also says it depends on the person. Some people I tell I have ADHD. Other people I just tell that I have trouble controlling my temper. Exactly. Andrew says, I face the concern that rehearsing a plan won't generalize to real situation. Yeah, because there is no predicting when or how often opportunities, right? And that's you don't know how often that opportunity will arise. That's why you don't just make the plan, you practice the plan, right? That way you are actually utilizing the plan so that you can apply it when you have to. So that's a really good point. Don't miss that very critical part. Make the plan, but practice the plan so you can put it into action. Because you're right, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months before you have to put that plan into action. But if you've practiced it, you've had that opportunity. Shoma says, hi, please could you suggest when my 10-year-old gets angry, he doesn't know what to do, right? So I think, Shoma, all of those suggestions that we came up with earlier, I would go through those with him, right? Talk about those different suggestions with him. Maybe replay this webinar later and come up with a list that he can actually try, okay? The goal here is to actually get them to a point, get your child or your clients or yourself where you're using these skills independently. So first we have getting that plan together and then actually practicing that plan. Now, other studies from UCLA, these are preliminary studies, suggest that when you actually label an emotion, it has a positive effect on emotion regulation. They looked at a group of individuals and they found that when a person looks at a photograph of an angry face, that's all they see. They see an angry face. There's actually increased activity in the amygdala. Say that 10 times fast. Amygdala. There's increased activity in the amygdala. And that is the area that's responsible for fight or flight response, right? So you see an angry face and that fight or flight response kicks in. Okay, there's increased activity in that area. However, when those same individuals were shown an angry face and it was labeled with the word angry, then another area of the brain actually kicked in. And this was the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is where executive function is controlled. It's where your emotions are controlled. Your inhibitory control is located in that prefrontal cortex. So just by labeling, just by giving that emotion a descriptor actually decreased that response in the amygdala and increased that that response or that activity in the prefrontal cortex. So that means that another area of the brain actually gets in the driver's seat, right? So no longer is that emotional situation making us stupid. Our prefrontal cortex kicks in, and then we can respond more appropriately. And I find this interesting. You know, I talked about earlier giving you the reasons why we're doing these strategies. And this one really resonates with me because when I was teaching years ago, back in the 90s, when I was teaching in a public school setting, and probably many of you can relate to this situation, we had to do conflict resolution, right? And it was always sitting with the students and saying, now, how did that make you feel? Well, I felt angry. And how do you think he felt when you did this? Well, I think he felt sad. And at times I thought that labeling or giving that emotion a descriptor was an important part of the process and it was effective. And sometimes I thought, you know, they're just telling me what they think I want to hear so they can, you know, go out to recess. So this was a really interesting thing for me to realize that just giving it a label actually has a positive effect. And I think that this next strategy that I'm going to introduce takes it one step further, a feelings folio, where you're actively engaged in naming your feelings. And this is an activity that you can definitely do as an adult, and you can adjust this for young children. This is an excellent activity to do as a family. So let's go through this feelings folio where you're actually actively engaged in this process. So first you want to decide where to keep your work. So jotting down your feelings. So this might be, maybe you have an online notebook, maybe it's a journal, a real paper journal that you like to keep. Just decide on where you want to write down your feelings. Then come up with a list of words that describe different emotions. So it may be enraged, it may be exuberant, it may be happy. You can even type in some words right now that you're thinking about and try to go beyond just happy, sad, angry, but some words that maybe you don't use all the time and introduce those to your students and your clients as well. Then once you have a series of words written down that describe different emotions, take a dictionary, or of course, probably most of us are going online, and you are going to look up the actual definition of the emotion, okay? And then jot that down. The next part is really important. So we have the words, right? We have the actual literal definition of the words. Then let's go to a thesaurus and look at other words that have the same meaning. Go through those words and pick out the words that really have meaning to you. What word really describes how you felt in a certain situation? So you're going to have your main word, and then you're going to have the word that means the same thing, but it really resonates with you, right? You can think of a time in your past where you had this emotion, and take some time to reflect and jot down what happened, what was the situation, how did you feel, what led up to that situation, how did you deal with it, what came out of that was positive, what would you like to improve in that situation. So now you're going through a more engaged type of process where you're not just labeling it, but you're thinking about that label. You're thinking about how it applies to a certain situation that you've experienced in the past. And when you can actually take the time to think about how that emotion and what that emotion means to you personally, you're going to be more aware of how you feel. And then once you're more aware of those feelings, you're going to be better able to control those emotions and respond in a more positive way. Andrew says, wow, then I wonder if we can diminish our emotion reactions just by watching a lot of videos of people being angry when angry is on the screen. That's a very good question. That is an excellent question for your next study project, but that's a really good question. James says, excellent job. Oh, great. Thank you, James. I'm glad you're getting something out of this. And Monica, I will share the references. They're all referenced. So when you look at the ebook that's going to be posted online later this week, you'll be able to look at all those references. Actually, I'll have the ebook in today's email follow-up, so you'll be able to look at those references as well. Kristen says, in my house, we call it name to tame as shorthand to remember to do this. Very good. Name to tame. I like that too. You all have such creative ideas. Very good. Okay, you have so many good comments. I'm sorry I can't share them all, but very good. So now we've talked about making the plan, practicing the plan, and then putting a word or labeling or defining, I guess you could say, giving a descriptor to that emotion. So we know all of those are important. This is an activity you can do that really brings all of that together. And some of you may be very familiar with this. It's called the zones of regulation. And you can look this up online. And there are a lot of charts and a lot of activity ideas that will help you with the zones of regulation. But it really does bring all of these areas together that we've been talking about. The first step, of course, like we've been talking about, is to identify and label the emotion. So that's what we've been talking about. Monica, you've been wanting to learn about this. Great. There's a lot of good resources online on this as well. You can use the comparison of a motion traffic light to know when to stop and when to go. So this is a good visual to give your students or your clients or your child. So give them a visual of when to stop, when to go. These are the different zones. And then this activity actually helps you label those different zones. So the rest area is the blue zone. This is where you have low energy, you're not very productive. And the emotions, notice here that we are labeling our emotions. The emotions are sad, tired, sick, bored. The green zone, this is where you want to be. This is the good zone, right? This is where you are balanced and you're positive. So when you're doing this activity, you might want to talk about this zone, and this is the good zone. So how do you think you might feel? You know, what do you think you'd feel if you're in that good zone? Give me some words about how you feel, and really get your child or your clients thinking about the different ways to describe how they feel in this good, positive zone where they want to be. And then you can use emojis like I have on the screen to illustrate it. They could draw pictures of the different zones. You could cut out pictures from a magazine and make a collage. So there's lots of different ways you can make this hands-on. Okay. Now also the slow zone. This is that yellow zone. Things might be starting to get a little troubling. Okay. This is where you start feeling like, oh no, something's going to happen here, right? And so you might start feeling silly, or you're getting wiggly, you're getting a little frustrated or hyperactive or upset. So now if you can recognize you're in this zone, okay, you've left that green zone and now you're in this zone where you feel something bubbling up inside, this is time to slow down and try to get yourself back to that green zone. The red zone is where we want to stop. This is not where we want to be. So you see how it's kind of like a traffic light. Green is good. Yellow, we got to slow ourselves down, and red, we have to stop ourselves. You don't feel good. You might be mad or anxious or yelling or hitting. So those are the different zones that you're looking for. And of course, you want to create that game plan. So you've put a label on it, you understand and recognize all the zones, and then remember your plan. What are your strategies? What are you going to do in order to get yourself back into that green zone? So again, the zones of regulation, really good. You might want to look that up. And we have an excellent science experiment that you can actually do along with this. And when you download the ebook today after the webinar, when I send up the email follow-up, there is a great science video on this page, and it actually incorporates a science experiment using the changing zones or the changing states of water when you combine it with air pressure. So a great way to bring together science and emotion regulation. And again, you'll be able to access that video when you do the follow-up on the ebook. Now, we've talked about a lot of different areas, but it's important we remember empathy and emotion regulation. So children who manage their own emotions well and respond appropriately to other people's emotions have more positive interactions with their peers. Andrew said, could there be a bracelet with those 4 zones on as a reminder? That is an excellent idea. Very good. I think you're right. I think that reminder would be very helpful. And if there were beads, each bead could be a different color of the zone. That's a good idea. So empathy. So being able to understand your own emotions, which is what we've been going through on the feelings folio, but it's important to remember that we have to understand other people's feelings as well. And this is where you want to bring in empathy. It allows you to put yourself in other people's shoes. So of course, probably many of you do this with your children already. So you might look at in a book and see an illustration of a person and their expression, or maybe in a magazine. And if they're sad or happy, ask them how they're feeling. How do you think that person is feeling? And what do you think might have led up to that? Why do you think they feel that way? And how do you think you should respond to that? So when you do certain activities like that, where they really have to think not just about their own emotions, but about other people's emotions. Other people have emotions too. That will be a really good exercise in developing empathy and kindness. So now here is a chart that you can use to really remind yourself or remind your child how to be present when you're talking to another person. Because part of empathy is being present and mindful when you're in a conversation with another person. I know that we've all experienced a time where we may be pouring our hearts out to someone, and then you think, I don't think they're even listening to me. And then that has such a negative response. So good communication skills, they are very important. So think about this list and how you can incorporate these into your day-to-day conversations to make certain that you are developing empathy in yourself or in your child or your students. First, of course, when you're communicating with someone, avoid a wandering mind. You want to be mindful. You want to be present for that person. Make eye contact. People want to see that you are engaged, and the best way to show that you're engaged with someone is to look at them, make that eye contact. Listen without thinking about what you're going to say, right? This isn't about you. When you're in this type of situation and the other person is talking, that is time for you to be present and fully listen. Don't be thinking about what you should say next. It's not about you. And especially if you start thinking about what you're going to say next, you'll probably miss what they're saying, right? Because you're no longer attending to what they're saying. And then take the time to process the information and then respond. Remember, we talked about how processing skill is important in emotion regulation. So listen fully, be present, process the information, and then respond. Help them feel like they are the most important person. So really let them express themselves. Try a lot of times what we tend to do in this type of situation is say, oh, I know, I understand, this happened to me. And then you go on into your own story. But you want to make certain you don't do that so much. It's good to acknowledge that you understand, but make certain that they fully expressed what they wanted to express before you go on to your own story, because then it shifts that direction more towards you rather than the person that you are really trying to be present for. And if you can practice this, and again, you could even role play this, then you will able to really be better at communicating. And finally, not finally, but almost finally, we have modeling, right? We want to model effective emotion regulation. Modeling is a crucial mechanism through which children learn. They are watching you. So make certain that you, like we've heard, practice what you preach, right? It means more. What you do means more than what you say. So if you're going through these practices with your child and you're coming up with a plan and you're practicing the plan, and then you yourself don't use the plan, then you're not doing good modeling. They learn by watching, and they are watching you, whether you think they are or not. They really do learn. So make certain that you take some time yourself to incorporate some of these strategies and model. And we're not perfect. Some days we are going to respond poorly. Maybe many days we're going to respond poorly. But it's important that you take that opportunity as a teachable moment. And after the event, sit down and say, I responded very poorly to that situation. What do you think I should have done? Or this is what I think I should have done that would have made things better. Okay. That's really important to incorporate, where we're going to make mistakes, right? But give them an opportunity to talk about it and recognize your mistake and how you could improve. James says, that's exactly how I raised my son, and it worked well. Good. Excellent. Now also, and this is the finally, we of course have play attention. And your play attention customized plan, if you haven't looked into play attention as of yet, of course, your customized plan will actually address all of these cognitive skills that are the foundational skills for strong emotion regulation. So when we talk, and a lot of you have seen the play attention main screen where we show the different cognitive skills, and many times you might look at those and think, but I don't see emotion regulation. And that's one of the major areas that I want to improve is emotion regulation. And I don't see an activity that says emotion regulation. But when you're working on play attention, we are actually developing all of these foundational skills. So in the intermediate and advanced skill options of all of our cognitive exercises, we work on processing speed. We work on the ability to process. Attention is key, right? Because when you have this body wave armband on, we are monitoring your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer where you actually activate all of the activities just with your attentive state alone. So in every single activity, you're practicing staying attentive. Planning is part of the process as well, because if you are going to be able to plan, you have to be able to process, pay attention, filter distractions. Those are all of the areas we address. Impulse control is worked on in every single activity in the intermediate and advanced skill options. And of course, mental flexibility. We have task switching incorporated into all of the intermediate and advanced skill options. So when you get up there in those higher levels of skills, we're not only working on attention, but processing speed and impulse control and the ability to task switch or improve that mental flexibility. All of that is incorporated into your plan. And if you're wondering, well, I don't know if these skills are really an issue, and you want a further look or deeper look into your current skill set, or perhaps your child's or your client's, we do have a focus assessment available. And the focus assessment is a norm reference test of attentional control. It is computer-based. It takes about 20 minutes in length. And at the end of the 20 minutes, we receive a full report here that tells us how you performed compared to the performance of your peers. Then we will schedule about a 30-minute block of time to review those results with you. So if you are interested, and I know a lot of you, after Amber did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on organization, many of you did the focus assessment following that webinar. And we really learned a lot and had some great discussions with many of you. So if you would like to do the focus assessment, we will extend that special offer that we had. The assessment and the follow-up to discuss is typically $50, but all of you here will get that at half price. So if you want to do it, it will be $25 for the assessment. We can send that to you electronically. You can log in and do the assessment. It takes about 20 minutes in length. And then again, we need to have about a 30-minute follow-up call with you. Catherine says, is this for adults as well? Both focus and play attention, both of those are appropriate for children and adults. We recommend 5 years old all the way up through 105. So children and adults is appropriate. And Catherine, it's interesting. I had several individuals after our last webinar, and they did the focus assessment themselves, and they also had their child do the focus assessment. And that opened up a lot of interesting discussions. Some of them were very similar, some of them were complete opposites. So it is really interesting, but it's a good way to just really get a clear picture and talk these areas through. So we look at all of these cognitive skills that we are talking about, your ability to pay attention, direct and sustain your attention. We look at your processing speed. We look at your impulse control, your ability to filter distractions. All of that is assessed within the focus assessment. So if you would like us to contact you about the focus assessment and get you registered for that, just type in focus, and one of us will contact you very shortly to help you get started on the focus assessment. Some of you did raise your hands, but please do type in focus so that we can follow up with a phone call and get you registered, okay? Again, that is just electronic, so we can get that out to you pretty quickly after you request it. And you will get that 50% off, so it will be just $25 per assessment and follow-up. Now, it's not enough just to have an assessment, right? And to tell you the areas that are weak. We have to have a plan of action, right? We're all about making our plans and following through. So when we talk about the different areas that you want to improve, we can also talk about how we would customize your play attention plan to actually address those cognitive skills that right now, again, may be weak for you, but lay the foundation for strong executive function. So that will be part of it, allowing you to look at your different skill set, talk about those different areas, and then review a customized plan so that you know that, okay, I might have difficulty with sustaining attention, and these are the activities within play attention that we can incorporate into your profile and improve those areas. Because the key here is what we started with. In order to improve executive function, we have to have these specific cognitive skills strengthened, and then we can have strong executive function and self-regulation. You didn't type in your name, so I'm not certain of your name, but you said, what is play attention? A game, a device? On the pick. So it's a combination of a device, okay? So you have this Play Attention Body Wave Armband. And that armband has 3 sensors, and those sensors monitor your brain activity indicative of your attention. And then that information is given over to the computer, where you access a series of cognitive exercises, and you control those cognitive exercises just with your mind, or more importantly, your attention alone. And you receive constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not you truly are focused and paying attention. If you want to know more about Play Attention specifically, we are going to have a webinar on Play Attention and how Play Attention improves executive function on January 14th. So if you want that webinar, if you want to attend that webinar, just type in webinar and we'll get you registered for that webinar. Or another good way, if you want more of a one-on-one time, we can do a one-on-one consultation with you, discuss your particular needs, and talk about how Play Attention can set up a profile to address your specific needs. So you can type in webinar, you can type in focus if you want to do the focus assessment. The focus assessment will basically come with a consult, or you can just do the consultation. Just type in consultation and we'll just do the consultation with you. So lots of different opportunities for you to learn how we can assess and then take this new year, right? Start the new year off by having a plan in place where we can improve executive function and self-regulation. Remember that this is all very important, because working on emotion regulation now will help you or your child develop positive relationships and focus on learning or focus on success in the workplace. It lays the foundation for a healthier, happier adulthood. So a summary of strategies. And if you'd like, you can tell me, we talked a lot about different strategies. Type in which strategy you're going to start with. Which one are you going to try? Or maybe you've already tried it, but you think you need to refine it. You can't do all of these at once. Select 1 or 2 that you might start with. So remember, you want to come up with a plan and then practice your plan. Also, talk about the feelings folio, right? Naming, putting a label to your emotions. It's a good practice. We know that it actually affects the activity in your brain. You can put it together, right? Monica, I know you're going to do that now. So put it together in the zones of regulation. Do our science experiment that you'll get later today. Practice empathy and kindness, and also model that good behavior. And finally, you can look into a customized Play Attention plan so that we can specifically work on the cognitive skills that lay the foundation for strong executive function. Okay, Olga, I can see your name now, and we will get that out to you, okay? Thank you for putting your name. All right, many of you have typed in different things that you'd like. I'll scroll back up in just a moment and make certain I've addressed all your questions. Just know if you've typed in any of those keywords, focus or consult or webinar, we'll make certain to follow up with you very shortly. And remember, we do have a few more webinars in our series on executive function. So make certain that you check our schedule. We send them out in an email. So many of you are probably receiving the email. Also, you can always go to our website and click on webinars and then special webinars, and you'll see all of our webinars in this series. We have an area on our website as well with all of the past webinars in this series. If you look at webinars and then you go to executive function webinar series recordings, that's where you'll see all of the past webinars, not only the webinar, but the podcast version and also the ebook that goes along with it. So just to reflect on what we chatted about today, make certain that I get all of your requests in. If you would like any of these next steps, please do it. Type in focus if you want us to contact you and get you registered for the focus assessment. Type in webinar if you want to attend that webinar on the 14th. You can type in consultation if you just want the consult. Remember, if you typed in focus, you're going to get the consult along with that. And if you have any ideas for new webinars, let me know, what would you like to discuss in any of our upcoming webinars? We do appreciate all of you taking out the time. This has been a great group. You had such good ideas. I think I have enough material from all of you to have another webinar just on this topic alone, but we do appreciate it. I'm going to scroll back through and make certain questions have been answered. It looks like many of you are just requesting that we follow up with you after the webinar, so know that we'll do that. Thank you so much, everyone. And I am going to Gabriella, you can have access to today's slides. Yes, I will include that in the email follow-up. James, thank you so much. Thanks for attending. Yes, Andrew, so I mentioned where to find those on our website. So go to webinars and then special webinar recordings. And that's where you'll get all of the past webinar recordings in this executive function series. Okay, so make certain that you go there. I'll include the link also in our email follow-up. Chana, is it possible to get the mindful drawing? Yes, you can get that. If you go back to those webinar recordings and you click on the one about how to stay focused in a distracted world, that has the mindful drawing exercise in that. Lisa, okay, we'll get you registered for the 14th. And today's recording. And thank you for clarifying your email addresses for some of you. Flora, you're asking what the evidence-based research on play attention is. You know, we've been doing play attention for about 27 years. I started using play attention back in 1996 with my students. So I've used play attention for many years, 25 years, from every age, from about 5 years old all the way up through adulthood. But there are 3 different university studies based out of Tufts University School of Medicine, where they actually went and they did a full play attention study within the Boston Public School District. And if you would like that information, Flora, I can send you the full studies if you would like to do that. They did a pilot study. They got such good results that they were funded by the Department of Education to do a further study. So there's the large study and then a 6-month follow-up to make certain that the skills maintained, which they did. We talk about that in our webinar on the 14th, but I'd be happy to send you those studies as well. Just type in Tufts and I'll get that out to you. All right, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Tina. You are all so kind, really. Let's see. Can play attention be used for clients if I incorporate it into my work with them and coaching? Absolutely. We have a home system available. We also have a professional system available where you can incorporate it with your work with clients. Absolutely. Darcy, yes, we will get that out to you. Any of you that have typed that in, we will make certain we get the Tufts studies as well. All right, just know that we had a very large webinar attendee list, so it may take us a while to follow up with all of you, but we so appreciate your time. We hope that you are having a great holiday and Happy New Year. Take care, everyone. We'll see you at the next event.